Hey, I'm Tristan. For my fraction assessment, I assessed Oliver, and he is a fourth grade student. He has been diagnosed with ADHD, and so he is very intellectual, but he struggles with some math facts. And so I just decided to test him on the third grade TEKS and then move forward to the fourth grade TEKS to see how he was doing. And so my task for him was he had to compare equivalent fractions, and he had to see which fractions were equivalent. So if he was given a diagram and it said 1/8 is equal to, he had to choose what it's equal to. And then he had to color the fractions, and then he compared fractions. So he was given two pictures where one fraction was colored in and then another fraction was colored in, and he had to see if which one was greater than, less than, equal to. He also had a number line that was an empty number line, and he had fractions, and he had to put the fractions in order on the number line, and he had to cut them out and glue them to see if he could recognize which fractions were smaller and which ones were larger. And we also did an assessment on adding and subtracting fractions, and then taking a fraction and decomposing it into two fractions, the sum of two fractions. So my plan for the assessment was to first assess him on his third grade TEKS. First, we had to assess him on equivalent fractions, and then we assessed him on comparing fractions. And so those are part of the third grade TEK. And so his equivalent fractions, for his equivalent fractions, he had to look, let me see, he had to shade in the pictures to see, like, there was a picture where a circle was divided into 4 and then a circle was divided into 2. He had to shade it equally to see which ones were equivalent, and it went all the way up to 1/5 and 1/10, 1/8, 1/6, 2/6, just comparing fractions in that way. And then we also, since he did good on equivalent fractions, we worked on comparing fractions, and he was really good at knowing which one was greater than, less than, if they were equal, and he was really good. He did those well with manipulatives and with pictures, and then we used pattern blocks for his manipulatives, but then he also did well when it was just given to him, so I figured that his fourth grade TEKS were pretty on point. So we moved to his fourth grade TEKS, and so we started with fractions on a number line, and this is a blank copy of what I gave him, but it was basically a number line, and then had all the fractions at the bottom, and so he had to cut out the fractions and glue them on the number line, and he did that correctly. He got a couple off, but he was correcting himself as he was talking to me. And then we moved on to adding and subtracting fractions, which was a real problem for him because he wanted to add, like, if it was 1/8 plus 1/8, he would add 1 plus 1 and then 8 plus 8. And so I gave him a few problems without any manipulatives, and I saw that he wasn't getting that. And so then we had pattern blocks, and we took 1/8 and then 1/8, and we worked on 1/8 plus 1/8 is 2/8. And then we worked on that way he wasn't adding the denominator, only the numerator. And so the results was basically that he struggled with addition and subtraction. Even with manipulatives, he had a hard time grasping it. And so for my plan, I would definitely have him work with fractions using pattern blocks, and maybe even using Cuisenaire rods. But first, he seemed to do really well with the pattern blocks, and so I would have him work on fractions using pattern blocks. And then I would have him first work on addition because that's easier. And once he mastered addition, then we would work on subtraction. And then once he mastered subtraction, then we would take a fraction and we would we would decompose it and make it into the sum of two fractions. And so when we started addition, he seemed to do pretty well with the pattern blocks, but it was still a struggle when he was on his own. When I was helping him, he was able to get it. When he was on his own, he wasn't. So I would definitely start out by reinforcing his knowledge of equivalent fractions, and then I would incorporate pattern blocks into that, and then incorporate addition, and then include subtraction, and then eventually he'd be able to decompose fractions and multiply and divide them, but he did awesome. So in my thing, I've included a paper about like how I did my assessment, and I included copies of his work. Okay.